We are live. We're here recording another episode of Laying It Down with Big D. I, of course, am your host, Andrew Big D Morrow, and I am joined by probably one of the most special guests that I could ever ask for to come onto the show, not to build you up too much here, but Anders Blume. Anders, you have a bit of history in our game of Counter-Strike, don't you? Oh, hang on. So you off there. Let's make sure we're recording out here. My God, yesterday I forgot to hit record. Okay, we're recording.
Nice. Perfect.
Okay. My God, if I made that mistake with you, I'd be so embarrassed. Okay.
It's one of the worst things that can happen.
Yeah. Well, I did a full interview yesterday and walked outside and was like, "Oops, I forgot to hit record." So, yeah, not making that mistake twice.
No, let's not. But yeah, obviously I've been playing the game since 1999, and I've been to LANs and played in competitive teams. Obviously back in like a really long time ago when things were very, very, very different. So I wouldn't say a high level. But I kind of got a taste of like what it means to practice for games and show up for tournaments and all this rest. Like super fun experience for me. Something that I still cherish a lot. And then, yeah, obviously been casting the game for a little over 12 years now. So it's been a big part of my life. Let's put it like that.
Well, and I kind of want to dive into like how things started for you. You mentioned you were around back in 1999. So 1999 is when the original mod for Half-Life came out, right?
Yes. And I wish I could go back and find out exactly like which like beta version it was. Like I know that I'm pretty sure some of the commands for some of the binds for like some of the console commands you had to like bind them in the console. Like there wasn't a menu to bind some of the things. And it was a giant mess, Like I think people if anyone ever goes back and even before like CS 1.0, where they fixed all the movement things, like any beta before that, if you look at it, if you don't know what it looked like, you're shocked to see the difference. Like 1.6 was like, from an animation point of view, such a more advanced, or even 1.0. But like before 1.0, that was when the big movement update kind of came in, or the animation update. It's crazy how much has changed. But yeah, it's been a minute since those days.
Well, and back in those days, one of the like main things that I remember with old Counter-Strike when I got to go and because I never had a PC growing up, I didn't get my PC until I was 23 years old, and the first thing that I did was play a bunch of Counter-Strike once I got that PC. But like I got to play Counter-Strike at like my cousin's house. We'd go over for family events and stuff, and I'd get to play on their PC. One of the big things that nobody remembers is you used to have to physically buy ammo for your weapon.
Yeah.
Back in the early days of Counter-Strike. So I'm very glad that that's not around anymore, because my God, that would be a pain in the ass. That actually makes me want to ask you, so you've been around for a long time. How does the trajectory of like what Counter-Strike 2 is on a development level right now look for you compared to like CSGO or CS Source or even 1.6 back in the day?
I mean, definitely, I think we're moving into like an era where Valve seem to be a little bit more hands-on with kind of like not just how they want the game to look, but maybe also how they sort of care about the pro circuit in whatever way that is. Like it's not exactly clear what their long-term goal is. I mean, they put out some goals when they introduced the VRS stuff, right? But those are just kind of words. It's hard to know how we end up there or what it means. So like I'm very, very interested, but I would say that definitely there is like more of a hands-on approach from Valve's side, as far as I can tell. I think that people just misunderstand about developing the game is that Valve don't just look at the esports side of it, right? In a way, they have however many, like 15, 20 million customers a month, and a vanishingly small amount of those are the esports crowd, right? A lot of them are also going to be just other people playing. And that's important to sort of recognize that from their point of view. Logically, I think they have to kind of like look at both sides of it and kind of see like how can we make this game interesting and so on and so forth. But I mean, I would say that the echoing everybody else's criticism basically, but like it is a bit of a shame that there aren't more fun ways to interact with Counter-Strike like there used to be with different weird maps and mods and all the rest of it, like the whole community server thing. I think it is kind of a shame, and I think that's a fair criticism. I don't know if that's like a. I can't imagine that Valve would say no to that because of like a cost thing, because I feel like Valve understand the power of having the community develop things for the game, but I don't know. Like, I'm wondering if it's like an IP thing that they like, if it's more like a legal kind of thing in the future. Like, I'm noticing a lot of game companies right now are trying to are a lot more careful, Valve included, from what I can tell, with letting people mess around with their with their core stuff. And I'm wondering if that's like a legal thing that someone's raised. I don't know for sure. I don't have any special insight. I'm just truly just guessing.
Well, yeah, and I think that the like Valve definitely knows their community is what builds their games, and I mean you could say that about any game, but it's the community support for their games that keeps them so long lasting, right? Like you
Yeah.
look at Dota, you look at Half-Life, you look at Team Fortress, you look at uh, Counter-Strike as well, and all of those things. If you look deep into those games, Valve, from a development standpoint, almost doesn't have as much impact as the community people that build these things, right? They didn't build Dust 2. They didn't make Dota. They just know what the community wants and they're able
Yeah.
to deliver that to them. But yeah, I agree. I think the Counter-Strike 2 is on a better trajectory right now as far as like I saw Launders post something about CS2 versus CS:GO, and like CS2 is already
Yeah.
way ahead of where CS:GO was. And my God, too, not to go off on my own tangent because this is about you talking here, but the crazy short term memory of the Counter Strike community once once Counter Strike 2 came out and everybody was like, "Oh, I miss CS:GO."
I know.
Do you feel like Counter Strike 2 is at least better than CS:GO right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would put it like this: there might be some things about like how certain movement works or how like snappy some part of the game feels. Like I'm gonna lie, I'm not that good of a Counter Strike player that I'm really gonna care about that too much. Like I don't necessarily notice that. Like I'm not some super high elo player, so in that sense, I probably wouldn't be the first person to be able to pinpoint those things. But I'll say this: like if you go back to the days of pixel smokes where people can look under a smoke if they've, landed on the right corner. And, never mind smokes that don't even like, you have to wait, or you don't have to, but a lot of the time you're going to be waiting until the smoke is gone. It's like an automatic, back then, like 15, 16-second cooldown, where you're just like, oh, the game kind of comes to a pause. We're waiting for the smoke to disappear. And then the question is, do they have another smoke? Well, then we're waiting again. And, eventually we have to do something, right? Whereas now you have this whole dynamic of blowing open the smokes and everything else. And it's just to say that I think a lot of people would be shocked if we went back to the other style. If you were running up banana in CS2 and there was like a smoke that was on top of a box, and as you turn the corner, someone's there with an M4A1 sniping you in the head. And for you, it just looks like a smoke on a box, but for them, they've got like a little pixel that they can look under, and like you just wouldn't think that was exciting and fun. You'd be like, come on, do I have to learn a ton of weird pixel smokes to be able to play? I just think there might be other areas where CS:GO is more advanced, and maybe there's some stuff to be caught up to. But I think just on some of those things alone, like I think yeah, people forget like all the negative stuff, and that's probably quite normal. But I would argue that if we went back, people would be pretty shocked.
I think so too. I mean, it felt like in those last years of CS:GO, it was just which team knew the best one ways to be able to cheese through a round, right? Like,
Yeah,
and that's not all of Counter Strike, but like that's how it was feeling as time went on. So I'm really happy. Like I think the smokes specifically are such an exciting change to Counter Strike 2. I would like to know though, how you're a gamer. I know you've been playing games probably your whole life.
yeah.
Uh what brought you from the realm of playing games into getting into casting?
I mean, it was just such an accident. Like it wasn't ever really like a kind of a big dream or anything. I think maybe part of the truth is that like I didn't have a really well like formulated dream for my life when CS:GO came out, right? I just kind of was at university studying English. I'm not even really sure what the end goal for that was. I mean, and like 80% of people who study English end up becoming English teachers. So I guess that was probably like the direction that I was sort of drifting in. But no, it wasn't like some sort of like deep passion for any of it. But you got to do something, right? And then I guess like the thing that I noticed was when CS:GO sort of started to be played, in competitive teams right at the start, it's like end 2012, right, going into like 2013, um, I was listening to some of those broadcasts and I thought, man, there's really only talk about who's shooting who and who's doing well at the moment, and I kept noticing none of the commentators would ever mention, somebody throw smoke into a bomb site and then they would run the other way. And I thought, why not mention why they're doing that? Like, why not say that they're not? It's not like they don't know what to do with the smokes. Like, they're doing a fake. Like, just say the word. They're faking an attack on the bomb site and they're running back to the other way. I thought that's let's do that. Let's inform the audience about like what I'd like to do, try and call like the chess level of the game. Like, there's some game underneath the game that has nothing to do with shooting people, right? So, and I was frustrated about that. And then people kept telling me, like friends of mine were like, why don't you just do it yourself? Like, why instead of like complaining about what these other people aren't doing, why don't you do it? And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna do that. So then my first broadcast was like just me talking in like a very monotone, like analytical kind of voice saying, well, if you see here, the reason why they are, throwing this smoke to this position is because they're trying to lure this guy into a fight. And so I was like just talking, and then I just realized like after one broadcast, I think that doing that when there's like an exciting in smoke defuse or a crazy 1 versus 3 is I couldn't do it. Like it's like you have to follow the excitement, otherwise it's really weird. But I didn't know that was even going to happen. And then once I did that, I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. Like that's what it has to be. So I wanted it to be mostly analytical at the start, and then I think the play-by-play stuff just came as like some weird consequence even in that. And yeah, I mean, like, first day was 3 viewers, and then like second day was, I don't know, 10, and then like a week later it was like 100, and then it just kind of like grew incredibly fast from there. And it was partly like, random timing and a million other things. Like it's hard to probably impossible circumstances to recreate.
So did you start casting just as like an individual caster on your own Twitch stream?
Yeah, and then I mean, I would try to drag in some friends who kind of also play a bit of Counter Strike. Like I had a friend Albert who was who's there at the start, and it's like it's nice to have somebody to talk to and kind of like and Albert loved the game and he has like a charming personality, so we were doing it together some of the time. And then yeah, like it was just but I mean if I needed to do it alone, I would do it alone. If Albert wasn't around, it would just be me doing it. Yeah, and it was just like like I said, probably helped by the fact that I was a bit directionless in the rest of my life. This felt like I knew instantly. I remember like in the first week, I knew I'm never coming back to university again. Like, like I'm out. I had mentally like quit, and I didn't want to tell my family or my girlfriend who's my wife now. Like I was like, how can I tell them that like I'm just ditching this, like, and to essentially to talk about video games, it's like it seemed like but I knew like emotionally, I was like, there's no point in going back. Like this is what I need to do. Basically, I just knew that instantly. So
Dude, I've been casting for 2 years now for the North American scene, and I have a similar story of I finally did it after thinking about it for a while, and then that for like the first cast, you just feel it in your bones. You're like, this is what I'm meant to be doing right here. Like
yeah,
there's certain times in life where your body just tells you this is exactly where you're supposed to be right now.
yeah.
Um, so I'm I'm gonna try not to do any fangirling here, but you and Semler are the greatest casting duo of all time, period, in Big D's book. How did
Thank
you
you.
get linked up with Semler, and like was he like a friend, or was he somebody like once you started working for bigger tournaments, they just linked you up with and you guys found a connection?
Basically, Semler had made the move from LA to Stockholm to work with the Good Studio with James and all those people, right? Like they had a whole production thing going on in Stockholm. It was wild and crazy, like the Too Good House and all the rest of it. And he was doing some MOBA like game. I always forget what it's called, Blood something. But that game essentially died. And if you're like the guy in a game, like I think Semler was like the guy who was, so like, the most recognized voice in that game, but the game essentially just got like wrecked by the developers or something. So when a game like that dies, then what do you do? And everybody else at the time was into essentially Dota and StarCraft and then I guess the beginning of League or something like that. So it was all about like MOBA and RTS games. So I think Semler probably at that point in time was like trying to rediscover like where do I actually fit in? Like what am I actually meant to do now that this other thing that thought I was going to be doing was kind of gone. And then Counter Strike is slowly growing, and I'm doing some casting, and I think he just like heard a broadcast one evening, and he just messaged me and just said like, hey, this is really interesting. Like, do you wanna just like jump on and have a conversation about casting and Counter Strike? And then we just ended up talking for like I don't know, like 5 hours in a row or something crazy. And then were like, okay, let's try and do this, as a broadcast. And up until that point, right? Like I think Albert at this point actually had already said like he was gonna go, back to his studies, which is a totally reasonable idea. And I was just casting with like whoever was around. So like Hiko would come in and Freiburg would come in, like just kind of like random different pros that I would sort of, just because I was the only one covering every single bit of Counter Strike, like literally everything that was ever played. Like it doesn't matter if it was like European or NA. I think we covered all games. Like so, my schedule at this time was like basically the game started like 6 in the evening European time, and then we would cast until midnight or 1 in the morning, depending on like how many DDoS attacks and delays there were. And then there would be like a couple of hours break, and then the NA games would start like a little bit later when it's like 2 or 3 in the morning European time. And then we would go on to cast those until it was about 7 in the morning European time. And then we'd go to sleep, and then we just do that. So there were no games that like at that point in time we were in. I literally cast every single game there was, I think, and that was sick and kind of like super fun. I mean, there's no money in it, but like it was super interesting and fun. And Samuel and I think we realized really early on that like the benefit of having the reliability of like having someone who's just essentially on that same grind with you, so you don't have to find new people all the time and ask you like, are you available? And then people aren't, and it's like, oh, okay, then I'm doing it alone. Like that just became kind of like an automatic thing. And obviously we just had fun hanging out and talking and talking about Counter Strike. It was like a funny coincidence in that way.
This is what I go into a lot with my like colleagues that are all trying to make it in the casting space in NA is like find your duo, grind it out with that person because you are so much more recognizable with a second person in line with
Sure.
you. Um,
Yeah.
okay, well, and you talk about EU and NA. I mean, EU and NA have I mean, plus the CIS region, obviously, but I think that they are their own region, but like they kind of lump in with EU a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, do you- how do you feel about like something like the Shanghai Major where we're getting to see like China suddenly be activated as a region for Counter-Strike? Are there other underdeveloped areas that you would like to see get activated like that? And do you think Counter-Strike is still waiting for the whole world to get online with it?
I think the issue is that like it's a very like I would even say it's like a very very European centric expectation that everybody kind of has a desktop PC at home that can just play Counter Strike. Like for one, like in America, a lot of homes, right? It like the gaming station is like it's a console of some sort, right? Like so, but there might be a lot of people who are into gaming, but a lot of them don't have a PC. So then their interaction with Counter Strike is zero in that sense. And in a lot of other parts of the world, there just isn't enough hardware to go around. Like we don't have that many monitors and graphics cards to, if we wanted to supply all of India and China with that many desktop PCs for them to sort of play the game at the same rate, like that's not happening anytime soon. Like we need some technology breakthrough. So one of the reasons why mobile gaming is such a big thing in some of those areas, right, is because it's just a fact of how the hardware situation currently is. Like, obviously, if I was thinking about it from a strategic point of view, I'd say, of course, we should get China and India online for Counter. That'd be insane. Like, what a cool idea, right? You know,
Be
this
2
is actually
billion
my
plus people added to our
yeah.
scene.
I mean, this is my view on not just like in terms of gaming, but really in terms of everything. Like, sometimes when like my fear from a Counter Strike perspective is that there must be quite a few simples and Cyrus and Monasys and Donks that are like lost in China and India because they just never knew the game even existed. So I'm like, damn, we're missing out on all that cool stuff, right? But I mean, I feel the same way whenever we talk about education or anything, not to bring it into that topic, but if we could, if we could have better global education, then we would have, some of those really brilliant people like an Indian Einstein out there somewhere, but we need to be so like that's how I think about it. That basically is that it's a shit. Like we should try to get those people in because it's our loss when we don't see them play, right? Like who doesn't want to see the next donk? And maybe there's like some ultra donk out there, but again, that person has to have the right mind and the right love for the game, and they actually have to run into the game, right? But yeah, of course, I wish we could do that, but as far as I know, it's not just like a question of how much are we trying. It's also a question of like just the reality of like what's going on. But yeah, if I'm wrong about that, I'd love to be wrong, but that's the latest that I've heard. Because I brought it up in the past to people, and they're like, no, it's not going to be the same.
You're making me very excited here because that's exactly how I've looked at it for years and years as well. Is like it's a hardware situation. Some of these underdeveloped countries and regions around the world aren't online because they don't have the affordability of just being able to sit and play on a PC for hours a day that can play Counter-Strike, not just a PC, but one that can play Counter-Strike, because Counter-Strike is definitely a game that like you're hindered by your lack of equipment on it, right? Like
Yeah.
I think it goes to the same reason why American football isn't huge in every nation in the world. You have to set up a giant field, you have to have all these players, you have to have all this equipment to be able to play the game effectively. And so I don't think Counter-Strike is any different that way. I am going to ask you though, you mentioned Donk, ZywOo. I don't know if you mentioned ZywOo, but ZywOo is my favorite player of all time here.
Throw him in there.
Yeah, we're gonna lump him in. Who in your opinion, and maybe this is something you've talked about before, and I apologize if I've missed it. Who in your opinion is in the GOAT talk? We kids love to talk about the GOAT right now. Donk, ZywOo, and Monasy, and then adding Simple in there as well. Who of those four is really a GOAT to you? And then the follow-up question to that is, do you feel like this GOAT talk is too early on?
I mean, in a way, the boring answer is that like these kind of conversations are always going to be about like generating essentially just more conversation, right? Like it's
Right.
about having a take and saying this guy's it, right? Like because the truth obviously is that like we're measuring first of all like different versions of Counter-Strike and different eras and different like 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 the game as a whole was different, like I think famously if you go back and you watch like games from 2013, 14, 15, like a lot of the things people do and how they approach the game, we would now say, Jesus, these like some of this stuff is wild. Like they don't even know how to play around this. Like why are they not doing this differently? We all know how to do this now, or we all have a concept at least of how to do it. So matching people from that era versus Donk from today or something is kind of it's a fun exercise, but at the same time, it's like, are you gonna get like a something out of it like that? I don't know. So like my super vibes based situation is still for me that Simple is the GOAT. Like, and I would say that it's also partly because I think Simple has some what I would consider like almost like an artistic kind of intuition for the game. That again, like I think we've had this discussion before. Like I would say that somebody who's like very well schooled could be sort of the most well disciplined, well educated, like the best sort of athlete for the game. they might win more things, and it might be like a better way to like the most stable player to play across like a 5 year span or whatever. But like that guy sometimes is gonna get humbled by Simple, who just will do things where you're like, man, that should never happen. Like, and you should have never tried it, and it should have never worked anyway. But somehow all of those things just line. And for me, that's just so like nobody can do that like Simple can. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone who can do that either. I've seen lots of great players who can reach some ultra high level, and some of them maybe even ultimately surpass Simple, probably will in terms of like tournaments won and rating and all these other things, and that's fine. Like that's a cool conversation. But yeah, for me, like Simple is still like the goat. But I mean, like obviously that it can change. Like I'm just saying that that's how I interpret the whole question.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. I think that Simple is somebody that like he doesn't have the same amount of tournament wins that you would normally like consider when you look at somebody like Device or Dupree or the Astralis roster or even Fallen and
Sure.
the SK Gaming roster back in the day. He didn't ever exist in a dynasty team. He was just a dynasty himself with the way that he approached the game. And
Yep.
I mean, like you said, there's stuff that shouldn't have ever worked. There is nobody in the world who could ever fake flash by tossing an op through window and
Yeah.
then have that fucking work, right? Like
Yeah.
that's only a Simple thing. So I do agree with you that Simple, as far as an individual player approaching the game, is above all three of those. Like we talk about Zywoo, Donk, Monacy right now because that's what we have. But as far as like individual talent, it doesn't touch what Simple was able to do. Um, okay, you are from a region that is way more developed than North America. Being in EU, getting to see tier 2, tier 3, even probably sometimes tier 4 CS. What do you think that a region, I don't know how much you follow NACS, what do you think a region like NA, who is constantly striving to try to compete with those regions, needs to be able to either develop talent or compete or whatever it is? What do you think a region like NACS needs to be able to compete with EU? That's a big question.
Yeah. Oh man. I think there are so many things that work against NA right now in general, and it's like a cross of like a bunch of different problems. Like one problem is that I think that there's a lot more competition in NA between not just like Counter-Strike and other games, but like even PC and other platforms. Like there are whole Call of Duty communities that are just like they've never touched a PC. They will all play with a controller, and that's what they know. So like there's like that weird segmentation that I feel like is higher than it is in Europe. So I think there's something there where like there's already like a bit of a fracturing. So that might be one part of it. Then I guess there's also just like the I don't know if this is my perception is that a lot of American orgs, they treat this esports thing as more of like a sort of a straight business thing, and if Counter-Strike is the new cool thing, then we're going to make Counter-Strike teams and compete in that. But the second it's something else, we're going to move on and do that. And then we're just going to keep doing that, until the end of time. And that to me just feels a little bit hollow. I feel like why not try to build something on a longer time scale and try and build some history behind it and all the rest of it. Because I think the support is there for it too. Like my sense is that the NA fans really love their teams. I think that's super awesome. Like I want them to do that. I think that even if they know that some of them are like not at all at a high enough level yet, it's like that doesn't really matter. Like that's not what support is about. So I think there is something there where it's like there's sort of like a chasing of the next big thing. And that kind of like undermines some things. And then I think the other problem is that streaming is such a viable option if you're like a decent player in North America. So,
Looking at you, Shroud.
it's a lot of people, right? And I kind of get it too, right? Because if the option is like you can practice Counter-Strike 8 hours a day with a coach that's going to criticize you and all this like stuff, and you have to like, you have to the ups and downs and the losses, and you have to travel around the world and boot camp, and you like, it's like a whole mess of things. And sure, it could be cool and fun, but it could also be, it could also be a lot, and it could also be, like the requirement of you as a person is a lot higher, and there are a lot of people who depend on you. If you're having a bad week, then you've got to get over it and try and find a way to fit into the team anyway. And then if on the other side of that is, a streaming contract that pays you like way more than you would as a player, and you just have to play the video games that you want to play and kind of hang out and do that. Not to say streaming is super easy, but relatively speaking, for some of these people, right, it is a much easier choice, and that's an
Compared to all the
incentive-based
things
thing.
you said, it is.
Yeah, exactly. So like the incentives are badly aligned for people to say, I'm going to like find a way to grind my way through this and really, do it because I love the competition and all the rest of it, right? So there's something there too, I would say. And then obviously now we're in a world where so many of the big tournaments are just hard to host in America because there's like visa for all these visa problems and all the rest of it, and so it all moves to Europe. So now you've got an even deeper problem, which is that all the talent there. There's one more thing that I think I would say is important for the future, and I don't know who's going to take up the mantle on this, but like there's like a cultural. There needs to be like some sort of like redefinition of like American Counter-Strike culture where it's a lot less about like, who's better than who and like who can talk the most trash or anything like that, but it's a lot more about like some sort of, like willingness to have some deep learning and understanding and like mentor the next generation of people and really sort of say, like we're in it for like the long run and to try and build something really cool from the ground up. And I mean, these people exist in a like, somebody like Daps comes to mind for me, who's like kind of a legend at building a lot of cool things, and finding people and mentoring them and all the rest of it, right? But like you need that culture has to exist as soon as people kind of like dip their toes into the pro space, so that if you come from like a you're just playing FPL and you're like a superstar player and you can kind of like crush everybody on the stream. Like, yeah, but when you get picked up to a team, like, I don't care about any of that. Like, I need you to be a professional. I need you to stop all that shit and kind of like, take this more seriously. And somebody has to like, has to bring these people in line basically. And that's like a cultural thing, right? I think so. It's like an amalgamation of all these things is working against NAC from my point of view.
You're making me feel so validated here, Anders, because literally all of the things that I've thought about for the last 10 years, you're saying it out loud. North America needs to essentially, to sum it up in kind of uh, harsher terms, America needs to humble itself. Like they need to be ready to dedicate to that team instead of to the self, right? Like that's one of the major problems that happens in our country. Um, are you going to be at the Austin Major?
I don't know yet. I have no idea. There's like a whole visa situation for me that I have to figure out how to sort of like make that work. And I mean, we've done it in the past, but you never really know, right? Like how that plays out. It's always like kind of like a bit of a mess. And like in general, right now, the truth is, as far as I'm aware, there's no such thing as like an esports visa. So from like a work point of view, right? Like you have to explain why you're in the country working, and there are lots of workarounds to do that. Personally, I don't really like the workaround solution because I don't know. I just view it as like a weird way to try to do it. Like I would want to try and do it in a normal way where it's actually sort of legit and you actually say like, hey, I am really here offering a service that the country needs, and I have like a real reason to be here, and they know they can't necessarily just get anybody else. Like, but it's a really really hard process to go through, and so like that's one big issue just for that alone, unfortunately. And I've tried to like look at how to work it out, but it's definitely not easy. But then I mean the other thing is like who knows who's getting hired for what these days? Like I feel like it's truly a mystery to me at the moment. So I feel like even without any of the visa stuff or anything, like I wouldn't know necessarily at this point. It would be still probably still be a little bit unclear.
Yeah. Oh well, and I'm only going to ask you a couple more questions here. the second to last question, I like to keep these under an hour ish, about the same length as a Counter Strike pug. I like to imagine I know the couple of viewers who watch these attention spans. Um, do you what is it like for somebody at your level? Because obviously you've worked with all of these big giant tournament organizers. You've been at the tier one level for a while, but like we don't see you at every event now. We start seeing more and more people, but
Yeah,
yet we do see some people like Pimp is at every single event ever imaginable.
sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry if this is an awkward question, but like, what is the
No.
thing that keeps you from being able to get into each of these things? Because I have to imagine you definitely want to be a part of these things. You want to get paid. You want to do the job that you
Sure.
love. What is the thing that keeps you from being at these events?
Um, I mean, I'm not sure it's necessarily that something or someone is like keeping me from it in that sense. I think what is happening is like you gave sort of half the answer yourself already. There are a lot of really good like people in the space who are really good at commentary, right? Just like a big luxury problem for the game, you know, and that's kind of awesome, right? And I mean, again, I consider these people my friends, so I am also proud of them when I see them do amazing work. Like that's super sick. So that's part of it. Like there's like a certain amount of jobs, and there's a certain amount of people who are trying to sort of essentially land those jobs. So that kind of is that's one of the things, right? And for a lot of the analyst desk stuff, there are just I think comparably fewer people to pick from. At least at the moment. Like that could change, but that's kind of where we are right now. So it's I think for some analysts, once you kind of you understand how the show works, you understand what you're delivering. The show can also rely on you to deliver those things. Like there are a lot of moving parts in an esports broadcast, and for a show, it's important to have things that you're just like, we don't have to worry about that. Well, this guy's gonna always deliver this thing, and it's just that's awesome. So I think the comparison to someone like Jacob, for instance, is like that's part of the reason is that like he's a reliable, worker, and he knows his craft and he's good at it, and he brings a lot of other things to the broadcast. You could ask him to do a lot of other things, and he's gonna do it. So there's that whole side to it. And then I would say, I mean, like also just to be, like I think another thing is just that for a while, like this might be one of the things that I maybe underestimated, sort of the benefit of, when Semler and I were working together full time, right? Is that, it's like an automatic, here's my partner, it's Semler, we're going to be working together. And then that's it. And then, after this, I ended up casting with Jason, and then Jason went on to cast with Dinko, and then now I've been casting, then I casted with Maui for a bit. And then I ended up casting with Henry for a bit. And now this year I've been casting with Neo, and it's like, there's some inconsistency there that is like somewhat out of my control at the end of the day, like it's as much as you can make a deal with people or you can say like, yeah, we're gonna like work together, like things change in everybody's lives, so like none of the casters I end up casting, I'm not married to them, right? Like we don't have some sacred bond to stick together and cast forever. So when people eventually go off and do different things, like Jason at one point, he went off to coach Liquid in the middle of the pandemic, right, when we were casting together. And, I even said to him, like, I mean, I'm not going to hold you back from doing this. Like, there's no way to know if we even can cast any Counter-Strike. There's a global pandemic happening. So go and have some more security with Liquid, presumably, and go and explore that, right? And, so it's just to say that, like, having a longer term partner to work with is really, really hard to achieve. It just is. And that's one of I think that might be sort of another challenge. And then to be honest, I mean, like again, I try to I've been going through a lot of interesting emotions about all this stuff. Like there's also a truth in it, which is that like I myself have been through some really crazy things, since 2018, I would say. And I think that also just like impacted a lot of my life, and as a result, like a lot of my work. And I ended up spending a lot of time building Skybox as a company, right? Like that's a really successful project, and it's really cool, and I'm happy that it's going well. But it also just means that suddenly you're not like glued to every game the way that you were before, and then you get just a little bit more detached, and then you just get maybe you're sort of working on autopilot a little bit. You end up sort of saying, oh yeah, like I'm gonna rock up and I know what I'm doing, so I'm just gonna go into a broadcast and do the thing that I do. But then, do you notice when that thing isn't improving or it isn't quite like good enough? Maybe you don't. And then slowly but surely, like, things just kind of, get a little bit more unstable and a little bit more weird and a little bit more sort of, and I think, for me, that's something that I just, sometimes it takes like a big sort of waking up moment to realize. And for me, I would say like that was the end of last year was like when I could really see it like very clearly. I was like, damn, like, when was the last time I just even sat down to watch a tournament that I wasn't at, where I just was watching the Counter-Strike, asking questions, trying to figure out what's going on, like kind of enjoying like, every little detail of it. And I felt like, man, that's been way too long. And also felt like I drifted away from the community a lot. And I noticed that, to some extent, like if you don't have any connection to your own sort of fan base, then it doesn't really matter how many people are sort of supporting you in a way. Like you have to make an effort to try and sort of every once in a while show up and sort of recognize that, that there are some people out there. So I had like all these different things, because right in the beginning, I think my feeling was very much one of like, I feel like this is unfair and I'm upset about it. And that's nothing good comes from that place. It just absolutely cannot. At least for me, I couldn't build anything from that position. So then I had to like try to rebuild it, instead in my mind to say, how can I make this better myself? Like, how can I make it so that when I'm hired again for a tournament, I'm going to show up and I'm not just going to be like, the guy who's like, sort of like, oh yeah, here we are again. It's good old Anders back to do some casting. Like, I want to be like, a much better version of that. And then like, that's all I can do, right? So that's like that's my like my long reply to all that.
Well, yeah, there's no setting, no matter how high you go, there's no setting it on an autopilot and just hoping
Nope.
for the best, right? Like you still have to always be invested. And I'm curious too. This is the real second to last question here. If you don't get hired for something like the Austin Major or Dallas or whatever, because I know you were at Dallas last year, but you were doing the Impact stuff, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I even peeked through a little curtain and saw you back there, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's Anders." But I would you go to one of these? Do you ever find yourself going to any tournaments just as a spectator?
I would love to do that. It's probably not feasible for me to do it, but like it would be sick to just kind of experience, what does a tournament look like just from like a pure spectating point of view. I think the way my life is structured, it'd be very, very hard to sort of justify from like a time and even like financial perspective. Be super hard to figure it out. But it could be like, I mean, I definitely, I imagine you're seeing everything from like a quite different angle if you're not kind of working the event, but you're just there to experience it. That would be super fun, yeah.
It's well, I'll tell you, as a my first spectator Counter Strike events were going to IEM Dallas the last 2 years, and I think about it from a casting standpoint. Like if I was working that kind of event, I haven't gotten to do something like that yet, but uh, there is a very different experience when you're getting to sit in the crowd, you're chugging beers with all your friends, you're watching every kill come through on the big
Yeah.
screen. I mean, one of the most crazy things for anybody out there that has never been to live Counter-Strike, go watch a live Counter-Strike match in the arena and feel the bass of the sound system every
Yeah.
time one of the shots or headshots comes through. It's unlike anything you've ever experienced with Counter-Strike. My final question for you here, and again, thank you so much for joining me on this. This can go outside of esports, this can go outside of Counter-Strike. What is the advice you would give to a younger version of yourself or any young person that's listening right now? What's your general life advice here?
General life advice, man.
Easy question.
one of the ultimate like stupid problems in life is that almost all advice that's kind of like worth anything like that unfortunately doesn't make sense unless you've been through like a certain experience. So like this is like a really big confounding problem with giving people advice is that you can tell people something and unless they've been through the same thing, it just means nothing to them. It's literally like they're sort of, it's like you're giving them, like a key to a door that like they like haven't found yet or something like that. It's like, it just doesn't really make any sense. So it's I think about this a lot because I've got two kids now, right? So obviously you as a parent, you're like, ooh, I'm gonna teach them how to live like a
I'm
good
going to
life.
tell them exactly how to do it right.
Yeah, exactly. And like on some level, that's kind of a stupid way to approach it. I think there is. I think unfortunately some of the cliches are probably not that far off in terms of like following something that you're passionate about and trying to maximize that part of your life as much as you can. Whatever that is, like something that I've noticed is I've run into people who are passionate about, knitting or something, which I know nothing about. But like, if people are sufficiently passionate about something, generally it could be quite interesting, and you kind of realize, oh, this is actually like your passion for it alone is kind of cool, and this is like, not that I'm gonna take up knitting necessarily, but like but there's a certain quality in that, that I just think is like so it'd probably be something really generic like that about, so like having some sort of trust or some sort of confidence in yourself to try to follow whatever weird thing it is that you're into and just kind of like trying to do that. But again, like it's so easy to say and obviously it's so hard to do, but it would probably be something like that.
Yeah, especially at our age. I mean, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm gonna be 40 in December, so 39 at the moment.
Okay, so I'll be 35 in June, and yeah, I think especially for people at our age, it's I love what you said as well, man. Everything that you have said here has validated all of my thoughts. Advice is great, but what advice would I give to my younger self? I don't know. My younger self wouldn't fucking listen to it because he had
Yeah,
tons of advice and he never followed any of it. He had to find his own way. So
yeah.
yeah, I think just being confident in your own way and trying to develop a passion that you really care about is, I think,
Actually,
incredibly important.
actually, if I had to give like a secondary answer to that, I think I might say something like just try and do more things. Like just stop. Like again, like I'm like a chronic overthinker, so I'm the worst person in the world for following this advice. But in a way, I wish that like way earlier in my life, I instead of thinking about like, ooh, should I study, whatever, like biology or English or some other thing. Like I wish I had just picked something and just kind of like went and just gone that direction and said, whatever happens afterwards, who cares? Like, I wish I would have taken like a degree in like carpentry or something like that, because like that would be a sick skill to have. And if I ever became a carpenter, who really cares about that? Like it's just like that's something that you can do for life, no matter what you're doing else. But the thing is, like, at least for me, like I ended up spending, I feel like, a lot of my life kind of meandering around, and then it's like not that it was all wasted time, but like on some level, it's like, man, if I had spent a lot more time trying to do different things, then I'd probably just I might find more things that I didn't want to do or that I didn't like or that I wasn't good at, but at the end of the day, who cares about that? Just throw it away and go do the next thing, and then eventually you'll end up with like a handful of more things. So I would say that like but planning your life when you're like 18 is a ridiculous idea. I think just like don't plan that far ahead. I don't think it's worth it. So
Well, you saying that as well makes me realize like maybe not advice for a young person, but for people in our age group, quit regretting the things that you've done and be happy with where they've gotten you to, right? Like that's
yeah, and do more things like this. I mean, for me, like I don't know, I have like 100 million things I still want to do, right? So like, I don't think it's like you could, if you picked up speaking Spanish tomorrow, right? Like you'd have a lot of years to enjoy the whole world in Spanish suddenly, right? So like, just like there's
speaking of
no
that, I've got a 515-day Duolingo streak speaking Spanish,
nice.
so
There we
I'm
go.
working hard.
Yeah, might as well, right? Like it's just like there's no reason not to do it, right? Like it's always better to just kind of start something like that. So
Exactly. Well, Anders, thank you so freaking much. I was gonna say I don't know if you're familiar with the Saturday with Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live, but there's a sketch that he used to do before we go out of here. I'm just gonna do a short story time. There was a sketch that he used to do where he was like interviewing famous people, and the interview was always just him being like, "Hey, you remember this part in the that movie that you did? That was so cool, dude." And I'm really proud of myself. Little shout out to Big D here for not doing that here with Anders Bloom. But I do want to give you something before I go. I watched the Inhuman Reactions Hiko clip about 5 times this morning before having you on this morning. I mean, seriously, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for everything that you do for our scene. Thank you for contributing your efforts to the impact scene as well, because we didn't even touch on that. Maybe round two we'll touch on it.
Round
I
two,
think
yes.
that impact is getting very exciting right now. And
Yep.
I love seeing women's Counter-Strike start getting on the level. And yeah, I just really appreciate you coming through and doing this interview with me, man.
Yeah, yeah, you're super welcome. I mean, it's good fun, good times. Always happy to do it again. So, thank you as well.
And shout out to Darth Mike for mentioning me on when I popped through the stream the other day. All right.
Nice.